The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Arizona territory, turning the wide street of Redemption into a river of golden dust. A rider came in slow from the North Trail, his silhouette tall against the burning sky. Blood darkened his left shoulder, but his gun hand remained steady. 3 bodies lay behind him in a canyon 20 miles back. Only one had escaped his justice. They say a man must face death at least 3 times to understand the value of life. This was Jack Morgan's 4th. As his horse limped into town, townsfolk scattered from his path. At 45, Jack wore the years like notches on his gun belt, each one earned through blood and loss. The war between the states had taken his youth. The decade that followed had taken his brother. Now he hunted men for bounty, not for money, but for something that burned deeper. The name Frank Blackwood sat like poison in his mouth. The man who'd put a bullet in his younger brother's back 5 years ago had escaped the noose too many times. Intelligence placed him nearby, working for a new employer, a man buying up half the territory. Jack dismounted outside the livery, his boots raising dust that clung to his blood-soaked shirt. Pain throbbed beneath the makeshift bandage, but pain was an old companion. He paid the stable boy without a word and headed toward the sheriff's office. Sheriff Wilson looked up from his desk, recognition flashing across his weathered face. They'd ridden together during the war, 2 young men in blue who'd seen too much death before they turned 25. The years between had carved deep lines around Wilson's eyes, but the steady gaze remained unchanged. "Thought you'd be dead by now, Morgan." "Not for lack of trying," Jack replied, lowering himself into a chair. "Blackwood's in the territory." Wilson's expression hardened. "Working for Marshall Reed now, the Cattlemen's Association." He spat the name like something rotten. "Reed's buying up every claim in water, right from here to the Superstition Mountains. Anyone who won't sell meets with unfortunate accidents." Jack nodded, the familiar cold settling in his chest. "Any law around here still remember what it stands for?" Wilson's laugh carried no humor. "You're looking at what's left of it." Night fell as Jack made his way toward the boarding house, the wound in his shoulder a steady pulse of fire. The street was emptying, businesses closing their doors against the coming darkness. Only the saloon blazed with light and noise, spilling piano music onto the dusty thoroughfare. That's when he saw her, a woman running, skirts gathered in her hands, her steps uneven on the uneven boardwalk. Behind her, 2 men followed, their intentions clear in their laughter and quick strides. She turned down an alley, a mistake that would corner her against the back of the Mercantile. Jack changed direction, moving with purpose despite his injury. As he rounded the corner, he saw the woman pressed against the wall, her face pale in the moonlight. One man gripped her arm while the other pawed at the small bag hanging from her wrist. "Evening, gentlemen." Jack's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. They turned, the larger one sneering. "Mind your business, stranger." "The lady seems uncomfortable with your company," Jack replied, not moving from the mouth of the alley. The woman's eyes found his fierce, not frightened. She struggled for breath, one hand clutching at her high collar. "This ain't your concern," the second man growled, reaching beneath his coat. Jack's gun appeared in his hand as if conjured from the air itself. "I'm making it my concern." What followed was brief and decisive. The first man rushed him, meeting the butt of Jack's revolver. The second managed to clear leather before Jack's bullet shattered his kneecap. Screams echoed between the buildings as both men dragged themselves away, leaving trails of blood and curses in the dirt. The woman remained against the wall, still struggling for breath. Her fingers worked frantically at her collar. "Could you," she gasped, her voice strained. "Could you unbutton this? I can't seem to. I can't breathe." Jack hesitated only a moment before holstering his weapon and stepping forward. With steady fingers, he unfastened the top buttons of her high collar. She drew a deep breath, color returning to her face. "Thank you," she said, composure returning to her voice. In the dim light, he could see she was perhaps 40, with intelligent eyes that assessed him without fear. "I'm Clara Hayes. I don't normally require rescue, but tonight was an exception." "Jack Morgan," he replied, stepping back to a respectful distance. "Those men work for someone?" "Marshall Reed," she answered, straightening her skirts. "He believes my late husband left something of value in my possession. He's not wrong." Jack noticed the bloodstains spreading across his shirt, then the exertion having reopened his wound. "You're injured," Clara said, her tone shifting to professional assessment. "I was a field nurse during the war. My cabin's at the edge of town. I can treat that before infection sets in." Jack's instinct was to refuse. Trust came at too high a price in his line of work. But the blood loss was making decisions for him. "Lead the way, Mrs. Hayes." The cabin sat beneath a stand of cottonwoods at the edge of town, small but well kept. Inside, Clara moved with efficiency, lighting lamps and gathering supplies. Jack lowered himself onto a sturdy chair, watching as she heated water and laid out clean bandages. "Shirt off," she ordered. "All business now. How long have you been riding with a bullet in you?" 2 days, he admitted, wincing as he peeled the blood-stiff fabric from his skin. She made a disapproving sound. "You're lucky to still have an arm." Her hands were cool against his fevered skin as she cleaned and examined the wound. "The bullet passed through clean. You'll live, provided you rest and keep it from festering." As she worked, Jack's eyes fell on a folded paper partially visible beneath a book on the table, the corner of a map, with markings he recognized as survey notations for a mine claim. "Your husband was a miner?" he asked, watching her reaction. Clara's hands paused momentarily. "An assayer for the territorial office. He died in a mining accident 3 months ago." The bitterness in her voice made the quotation marks audible. A week before he was to file a report on unauthorized claims in federal land. Jack connected the pieces. "Reed." She nodded, securing the bandage. "Thomas left this map with me for safekeeping. It shows a silver vein. Reed has been mining illegally, and the graves of 4 men who discovered it before my husband. That's why Reed's men were after you tonight. They come every few days. Threats, offers, intimidation." She stepped back, wiping her hands on a cloth. "I've managed to avoid them, until tonight." Jack studied her. Clara Hayes was no helpless widow. There was steel in her spine and calculation in her eyes. She'd survived a war, and now she was fighting another kind of battle alone. "Why stay?" he asked. "Take the map and leave the territory." "And let Reed get away with murder?" Fire flashed in her eyes. "This is my home. I won't be chased from it." Jack felt something stir within him, respect, and something else he couldn't name. "You should rest here tonight," she continued. "That shoulder needs time." As darkness deepened outside, Clara shared a simple meal of beans and bread. Jack learned she'd been a nurse at Antietam, where death had come in waves and mercy had been measured in morphine drops and whispered prayers. Her husband had been kind and honest, 2 qualities that had gotten him killed in a territory where neither was valued. "You're hunting someone," she said finally, watching him over the rim of her coffee cup. Jack saw no reason to lie. "Frank Blackwood. He killed my brother 5 years ago. Word is, he's working for Reed now." Something passed across her face recognition. Tall man with a burn scar on his left cheek? Jack's pulse quickened. "You've seen him?" "He was with Reed when they came to make their first offer for my husband's papers." She rose and moved to a trunk in the corner, returning with a small daguerreotype. "Is this the man who killed your brother?" The face staring back from the small photograph sent ice through Jack's veins. Frank Blackwood, unmistakable with his cold eyes and the distinctive scar running from eye to jaw. "Where did you get this?" "It fell from his coat during their visit. I kept it, thinking it might be useful someday." She studied his reaction. "Seems I was right." Dawn broke with the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Jack was on his feet instantly, gun drawn despite the protest from his injured shoulder. Clara moved to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. "Reed's men," she whispered. 3 of them. Jack checked his ammunition. "Stay inside." He positioned himself by the door as heavy boots struck the porch. A fist hammered against the wood. "Mrs. Hayes, time to settle accounts." Jack pulled the door open, his revolver level with the lead man's chest. The visitor's eyes widened, hand instinctively moving toward his holster. "I wouldn't." Jack advised quietly. The man froze, recognizing the look in Jack's eyes, the flat stare of someone who'd already decided how many bullets he was willing to spend. "This don't concern you, mister." "Mrs. Hayes owes nothing to Reed or anyone else," Jack replied. "Check your ledger again." The standoff stretched, tension crackling like heat lightning before a storm. Finally, the leader stepped back. "Reed ain't gonna like this. He gets what he wants, one way or another." "Not today," Jack said, never lowering his weapon. "Tell Reed if he wants to discuss matters, he can come himself." The men retreated to their horses, casting threats over their shoulders like stones. When they were gone, Clara appeared in the doorway beside him. "That won't be the end of it," she said. "No," Jack agreed. "It's just the beginning." The next day, Jack moved his few possessions from the boarding house to a small back room Clara offered. His wounded shoulder made him a liability, but the arrangement provided Clara protection while he healed. They established a routine, Clara tending to her sewing work while Jack kept watch and regained his strength. On the fourth day, Jack ventured into town for supplies and information. The saloon seemed the best place to start. He ordered whiskey and listened, picking up threads of conversation about Reed's operations, the men he'd brought in, the properties he'd acquired through means both legal and otherwise. Then a name caught his ear, Blackwood. Jack turned slightly, focusing on two men at a nearby table. "Blackwood's due back tomorrow with the papers for the Jenkins place," one said. "Reed's got big plans once he controls the water rights." Jack's hand tightened around his glass. Tomorrow. He was so focused on the conversation that he failed to notice the man who entered behind him until a murmur ran through the room. Jack glanced in the bar mirror and felt time stop. Frank Blackwood stood in the doorway, trail dust still clinging to his clothes, the familiar scar pale against his tanned face. 5 years melted away, and Jack was kneeling in the dirt again, holding his brother's lifeless body. Their eyes met in the mirror. Recognition dawned on Blackwood's face. Followed by a cold smile, his hand drifted toward his holster. The room went silent, patrons sliding away from the space between the two men. Jack turned slowly, ignoring the pain in his shoulder, his expression betraying nothing of the rage boiling inside him. "Morgan," Blackwood said, as if greeting an old friend, "heard you were still chasing ghosts." "Not ghosts," Jack replied, "just unfinished business." Blackwood's smile widened. "Your brother drew first. Everybody saw it." "We both know that's a lie." "Doesn't matter now, does it? He's still dead." Blackwood's fingers brushed his gun grip. "Maybe you're looking to join him." The tension stretched taut as a hangman's rope. Every instinct told Jack to draw, to end it here. But something held him back, the knowledge that Blackwood wasn't alone, that Reed was the head of the snake. A shot cracked through the saloon, but it wasn't from either man. A bottle exploded on the bar behind Blackwood's head. All eyes turned to the entrance, where Clara stood, a small derringer smoking in her hand. "Next one won't miss," she said evenly. "Sheriff's on his way. Unless you want to explain why you're drawing on a man in broad daylight, I suggest you holster that weapon, Mr. Blackwood." Blackwood's face darkened with rage, but the sound of approaching footsteps outside made him reconsider. With deliberate slowness, he moved his hand away from his gun. "Another time, Morgan," he promised, backing toward a side door, "when your woman isn't around to save you." After he was gone, Jack turned to Clara in disbelief. "You're full of surprises, Mrs. Hayes." She tucked the derringer back into her pocket. 4th Connecticut Volunteer Infantry wouldn't take women, so I learned to shoot from my father. Never lost the habit. Back at the cabin, Jack's mind raced with possibilities. Blackwood's presence changed everything, accelerated the timeline. "We need allies," he said finally. "Reed has too many men for just the two of us." Clara nodded. "I know a few who might help. Bob Hawkins lost his claim to Reed last year, and Miguel Vasquez, he owns the gun shop. Reed threatened his family when he refused to sell. By nightfall, they had assembled a small council of resistance: Sheriff Wilson, Bob Hawkins, Miguel Vasquez, and 2 others who'd suffered under Reed's expansion. Using Clara's map, they identified Reed's illegal mining operation and the likely location of evidence that would connect him to multiple murders. "If we can get proof," Wilson said, "I can bring in federal marshals from Tucson." Jack knew it wouldn't be that simple. Reed won't keep incriminating papers where they're easy to find. "His office at the Cattlemen's Association," Clara suggested. "I've been there, delivered mending." Heavy safe behind his desk. A plan took shape. Jack and Miguel would break into Reed's office while Wilson created a distraction at the saloon where Reed spent most evenings. Clara would keep watch from the milliner's shop across the street. Under cover of darkness, Jack and Miguel moved silently toward the imposing building that housed the Cattlemen's Association. Jack's shoulder ached, but adrenaline dulled the pain as they forced a back window and slipped inside. Reed's office was opulent, a statement of power in a frontier town. The safe stood exactly where Clara had described. Miguel went to work with tools that spoke of a past he didn't discuss, while Jack searched through papers on the desk. A ledger caught his eye, names and dates, payments and properties. As he flipped through the pages, a familiar name leaped out, Morgan. Next to it, a payment to Blackwood, dated 5 years earlier. Cold fury washed through him. His brother's death hadn't been chance, it had been business. Reed had wanted their small ranch for its water access, and Blackwood had been his instrument. The safe clicked open under Miguel's skilled fingers. Inside lay deeds, banknotes, and a stack of correspondence. Jack rifled through them quickly, finding what they needed, letters explicitly ordering removal of claimants who wouldn't sell, including Clara's husband. As they secured the evidence, a gunshot echoed from the street, then another. Jack moved to the window. Below, chaos erupted, men running, a woman screaming. Through the confusion, he spotted Clara being dragged toward a waiting wagon, struggling against 2 men. "They've got Clara," he hissed to Miguel. "Get the evidence to Wilson. I'm going after them." Jack burst from the building, ignoring Miguel's warning shout. Ahead, the wagon pulled away. Clara's struggles visible in the moonlight. Jack commandeered a horse from a hitching post, swinging into the saddle with a grimace of pain. The wound in his shoulder reopened, warm blood soaking his bandage, but he spurred the horse forward. The wagon headed east, toward the mountains where Reed's illegal mine operated. Jack followed at a distance, mapping their route against Clara's hidden map in his mind. They were headed for Devil's Canyon, a narrow passage where ambush would be easy. Night deepened as Jack skirted the main trail, taking a higher path that paralleled the canyon. Wind picked up, carrying dust that limited visibility, perfect cover for what he planned. The wagon stopped at a camp near the canyon entrance. Through his spyglass, Jack counted 8 men, including Reed himself, his bulk unmistakable even in the dim firelight. Blackwood stood nearby, rifle propped against his shoulder. Clara was bound to a post, her posture defiant despite her situation. Reed paced before her, gesturing angrily. Jack returned to his horse and unpacked his Winchester. The odds were poor, 8 against 1, but surprise would even them somewhat. He checked his ammunition and began working his way closer, using the increasing wind and dust for cover. As he reached a position overlooking the camp, he heard Reed's voice carrying on the wind. "The map, Mrs. Hayes, that's all I need. Tell me where it is, and you can go free." "Like my husband went free?" Clara's voice was steady. "I know what your promises are worth." Reed backhanded her, the sound carrying clearly to Jack's position. Rage flared, but he forced himself to remain still. Acting too soon would get them both killed. "Bring Morgan," Reed ordered Blackwood. "He'll talk if she won't." 2 men mounted up, heading back toward town. Jack realized with dread they were going after Sheriff Wilson and the others. The situation had just become more urgent. He aimed carefully at a stack of dynamite near the camp's perimeter, a standard tool for mining operations. One shot would create enough chaos for him to move in. The rifle cracked, the bullet finding its target. The explosion that followed lit the night like false dawn, sending men diving for cover and horses bolting in panic. Jack moved quickly, firing twice more into the camp before descending the slope. In the confusion, he reached Clara and cut her bonds. "Can you ride?" he asked, pressing a small revolver into her hand. Yes, she answered, taking the weapon without hesitation. Head for the South Pass, he directed. Wilson should be there with the others. What about you? Jack checked his ammunition. I have unfinished business with Blackwood. Clara gripped his arm. Don't throw your life away for revenge. Their eyes met in the firelight. It's not just revenge anymore, he said quietly. She understood then this had become about more than his brother or her husband. It was about stopping the corruption that had poisoned the territory, about justice long denied. Be careful, she whispered, then disappeared into the swirling dust. Jack turned back to the camp, where men were regrouping. Through the chaos, he spotted Reed taking cover behind a wagon, shouting orders. Blackwood was nowhere in sight. The hairs on Jack's neck rose. He spun, barely avoiding the knife that slashed through the space where he'd stood. Blackwood lunged from the shadows, his face twisted with hatred. 5 years I've been watching for you, Morgan, he snarled. Should have known you'd crawl out of your hole eventually. Jack blocked another knife strike, pain lancing through his injured shoulder. Reed paid you to kill my brother, he said, circling carefully. How much was his life worth? Enough, Blackwood grinned. Yours won't fetch nearly as much. They clashed again, Blackwood's knife against Jack's forearm. Jack drove his knee into the other man's stomach, creating space to draw his revolver. But Blackwood tackled him before he could fire. They tumbled down a slight incline, the gun flying from Jack's grasp. Jack landed hard on his wounded shoulder, vision blurring with pain. Blackwood recovered first, knife raised for a killing blow. Jack rolled, the blade striking dirt instead of flesh. He seized Blackwood's wrist, twisting until the knife fell free. They grappled in the dust, evenly matched despite Jack's injury. Blackwood landed a solid blow to Jack's jaw, then another to his wounded shoulder. Pain exploded through Jack's body, darkness threatening at the edges of his vision. Blackwood reached for his own revolver. Time to join your brother, he sneered. A shot cracked across the canyon, but it wasn't from Blackwood's gun. The outlaw's expression froze in surprise, a red stain blossoming on his chest. He toppled forward, revealing Clara standing behind him, smoke curling from her revolver. I told you I don't normally require rescue, she said, helping Jack to his feet. Above them, gunfire erupted as Sheriff Wilson and the others engaged Reed's remaining men. The tide was turning. Reed himself appeared at the rim of the slope, rifle aimed at Clara. Jack shoved her aside as the shot came, feeling fire tear through his side. He stumbled but remained standing, drawing his spare revolver from his boot. Their eyes locked across the distance, Reed's filled with arrogance and rage, Jack's with cold determination. Both fired simultaneously. Reed's shot went wide, Jack's did not. Marshal Reed fell backward, his body tumbling down the slope to land at their feet. In death, he seemed smaller somehow, his power stripped away to reveal just a man after all. Clara pressed her hand to Jack's bleeding side. That's twice you've saved me, she said softly. Jack managed a pained smile. And twice you've saved me. Seems we're even. By dawn, it was over. Reed's men were either dead, captured, or fled into the desert. Wilson had sent riders to Tucson for federal marshals. The evidence from Reed's safe would ensure justice for those who had suffered under his reign, including Jack's brother and Clara's husband. In the weeks that followed, Reed's empire crumbled. The illegal mining operation was shut down. The land returned to federal control. Properties taken through intimidation were restored to their rightful owners. Redemption began to live up to its name. Jack's wounds healed slowly under Clara's care. Their evenings were spent on her porch, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. They spoke of the past, sometimes of the war, of losses endured, of paths that had led them to this place. But increasingly, they spoke of the future. When Wilson offered Jack the position of deputy sheriff, he accepted after only a day's consideration. His days of bounty hunting were over. There were other ways to seek justice now. On a clear autumn morning, Jack stood before Clara's cabin, a small silver ring in his palm, fashioned from the first legal ore from the reopened mine. I can't promise an easy life, he said, but I can promise you won't face it alone. Clara took the ring, her smile more beautiful than any sunrise. "I haven't worn my collar buttoned to the top since that first night," she said. "I don't intend to start again." They were married in the small church at the center of town, Sheriff Wilson standing as witness. Jack wore no gun that day, a first in more years than he could remember. That evening, they sat together on the porch of what was now their cabin. Jack's revolver hung on a peg inside the door, within reach, but no longer strapped to his side. Clara wore a dress with an open collar, her neck bare to the cooling air. "Do you ever regret not going after the others?" she asked. "The ones who got away?" Jack considered the question, watching the last light fade from the western sky. "There will always be others," he said finally. "But this," he took her hand, feeling the silver ring against his palm, "this is worth staying for." The Arizona night settled around them, stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky. The past could not be changed, but the future stretched before them uncertain, perhaps, but faced together. For a man who had looked death in the face 4 times, Jack Morgan had finally found something worth living for. And that, he discovered, was the greatest victory of all.